Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. This is episode 45, and I'm very excited to have one of my great friends as a guest today. Before I introduce him, I want to introduce my book, which is called A Gift from Adversity, which is available on Amazon, and the subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. After I experienced this in Japan, and I did a lot of motivational speech, public speaking, and then people asked me if I had a book, and I did not. So I decided to publish a book. And this is about my life and story. But after I published my book, a lot of people told me their adversities, and I decided to create this platform for everyone to share their adversities, but not only that, tools that they use to overcome, and a gift that came from it. So today I'm very excited and honored to have a guest. His name is Mark Walker. He is multi-Grammy winning composer and drummer and a dear friend of mine. Thank you, Mark Walker, for coming to A Gift from University today.
Thanks for having me, Juri.
Great. So Mark, can you please tell our audience who you are and what you do?
Sure, my name is Mark Walker, and I am a drummer, composer, and educator.
And can you tell us about your Grammy?
Sure, I've been working for about 33 years with Paquito de Rivera, a great Cuban clarinetist and saxophonist, and I've played on many Grammy-winning recordings of his, and received a couple of statuettes, which I have in the studio here, many nominations, also for a Latin Grammy. And I also received a Grammy nomination for a composition that I wrote, and that sparked me to study further.
Great. And you recently graduated somewhere.
Yes, I decided to go for a master's degree at UMass Amherst in jazz composition because I worked with all these great composers and I really wanted to understand music. And that kind of relates to the whole adversity thing too, in a way, which I'll tell you in a minute. But I just graduated with a master's basically about a week and a half ago. So feeling pretty good.
Amazing. Congratulations on
Thank you.
all your accomplishments. And um, do you have a website or social media handle that people can visit and learn more about you?
Sure. I am on Instagram at Mark Walker Drums. And I also have a lesson website called markwalkerlessons.com, which is going to be expanded very shortly now that I have time.
Wonderful. So, and then you have upcoming exciting gigs. You have traveled all over the world as a drummer and composer. So, do you have any upcoming exciting gigs and traveling?
Yes. Um, I have my first dates with trumpeter Arturo Sandoval on June 3rd. And he actually called me for the gig right after I graduated. So it's kind of a perfect timing. And I'm also working with the Boston Pops for the first time on June 9th and 10th. We're doing an all Ellington program. So I'm really excited about that. And I downloaded the practice parts, but I also downloaded the scores because since I studied jazz composition, I really got into studying scores. So now I can see what's happening in the entire orchestra. And that's a major gift for a composer.
That's amazing. And I'm so excited for you. And I'm so honored to know you. And then we actually got to work together for Boston 48 our film project a couple weekend ago.
That was so much fun.
Yes. And we have a screening tonight. So we're very excited. And tell us about composing for the film.
Well, I thought once I graduated, the last 2 years have been very hectic because I teach at Berkeley, I teach at New England Conservatory, and I was studying full time at UMass Amherst and doing teacher's assistant work out there, which involved teaching, and also during the pandemic, I was mixing in the studio. Um, so, and also gigs on top of that, and a little bit of travel. So it got quite hectic, and things seemed really impossible. And once I passed through all of that, I was thinking, okay, this summer I am just going to chill out. So the day of my graduation, I wound up doing a gig that night. And then the day after I graduated, you called with this uh, film offer, the 48-hour film challenge. So I thought, okay, I'm a composer. I got to do this. There's no way I can say no to this. And so you said, okay, we need a heavy metal song. And, I haven't done any real heavy metal gigs. I mean, I'm mostly jazz and Latin. But I do come from a rock background and I played a lot of rock and I appreciate it. So I just sat down and made up something. And it was a lot of fun. And I actually, I borrowed a guitar from my son, a real cheap guitar that went out of tune every time I played it. And I played some power chords, and pretty soon this composition emerged, and it seemed to fit the film very well, which we'll find out tonight for sure.
It's fabulous.
So the thing that I really enjoyed about it was uh, that it had a deadline, even though I'd been struggling with deadlines for 2 years. This was fun. I mean, not that UMass wasn't, but this was a lot of fun. And it reminded me of the old days because I used to live in Chicago and I did a lot of studio sessions. We'd run around from studio to studio all day doing sessions, have Cartage bring our stuff. And, uh, and it was the way it was set up was everybody was a team. It was the advertising agency, the client, the producer, the musicians. They were all in the same space and they all worked together as a team. And sometimes it would be a situation where they might have a fader on the console specifically for the client. So if they need more of this or more of that, they could just raise it and lower it. But it didn't do anything. So they call it the client fader. But but it was fun. Everybody, it was a great vibe, and this reminded me of that. Even though I was working here in the studio and you were all working together, it did remind me of everybody pulling together to make something happen, and that is about as fun as it gets. Really, I mean, any fun situation is a social situation like that where everybody's into it and putting their all into it, and thinking creatively and working together. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you. I can't thank you enough for participating for this year's 40-hour film project, and we'll find out tonight. So let's actually move on to
Okay.
our topic, which is a gift from adversity. And then the first question I have for all of my guests is the adversity. So would you tell our audience what was your adversity?
Well, it's hard to say because there were lots of them. I don't want to get too specific because we're in public, but some things happened that kind of uh, sort of killed my confidence and got me thinking too much and got me seeking things to fill a void within myself. So, I lost some people close to me. There were some things that happened. And also, I was really disappointed with myself because I made a lot of bad decisions. And I wasn't really taking care of myself so much. But yeah, so that's pretty much what happens. I know that's not being very specific, but it's a little too personal to make it public. So hope that's okay for the program.
Yeah, that is totally fine. And then, this is a podcast that I created that I just wanted to have this platform to talk about these things. And then I think normalizing the conversation about the adversity and challenges are not normal, and then I wanted to make it more accessible for people to listen and then
Hmm.
share. So it's completely okay, whatever the comfort level that you have. So let's actually dissect a little bit. So without going to like real specifics, like you said something that happened that killed your confidence. Do you remember what age it was? Were you adult or were you young?
Yes, I was. Whoops, excuse me. I was a young child. I was about 8 years old, and yeah, a couple of things happened that just you know I saw some things that were really seemingly evil.
So my childhood was really hell, and then my abuse really started around 8 years old
Hmm.
when my parents divorced, and then my dad started to sexually physically abuse me. He kind of turned his sexual needs towards me,
Right.
and as young as 8 years old, it has so much impact in your life. I'm 45 right now,
Hmm.
and that was such a long time ago, but the trauma that happened around age 8 is really like affected me the whole life, and then still till still I'm like middle-aged woman and so like still it's affecting me, and it's annoying. Like it just I don't know how we can get rid of this impact that's created in the childhood.
Right. I mean, there's only so much you can do about that, uh, but I've learned to let it go and move on.
Yes. And so when it happened, like the challenge or adversity, that do you think it affected your school life and social life? Um,
Definitely.
mm,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Most definitely. I did very poorly in school from from grade school all through high school. I barely got through high school. I was going to drop out, so it took me a while to get that confidence back. And so I wound up taking I like to joke, I took a 40-year gap year after high school. But actually, there were lots of playing opportunities, so that helped. But there was a lot of many years where I didn't feel like I fit in, or I felt kind of lonely, and it was just basically I didn't really know what was going on, and I felt very immature, and sometimes I would act out. So even in a professional setting, sometimes.
so I think especially after the pandemic happened, a lot of people went through isolation and depression. But when I was growing up in Japan, mental health was never talked about. PTSD, I never heard of that word until I was actually at Berkeley, counselor when I was 23. That was the first time I've heard of that word, PTSD, and the trauma and then abuse. Those are the foreign language to me. Like in like we do have those words. And then when earthquake in 2011, big earthquake hit in the northern part of Japan and tsunami, and that's when people really started to talk about PTSD. And the Me Too movement is very recent in Japan as well. So it took so long for us to catch up to where we are right now. And then I think America, especially after the pandemic, a lot of people are talking about mental health and depression, and it's getting more accessible for the information and the conversation and resources. But how was it growing up in America, going through these challenges? That were there? Was there any services or help or languages that you learned, or was it hard to access those resources?
Well, for me, I grew up in a very turbulent time. I was growing up in Chicago uh, during the riots in 1968, and we were right there by Lincoln Park where it was happening. So tear gas would be coming through our back door sometimes, and it was a very, very turbulent time in America as well as in our neighborhood. And later on, I actually there was a kind of a bright light came. I joined judo a little bit. I practiced judo, and then I practiced taekwondo and yoga. That was my first exposure to yoga, and that was when I was a teenager. Um, and I was playing music too at the time, and I started playing in a band with some of the instructors at this place, and it was called Shin Sun Do. It was in Chicago, now called the Association for World Peace. Uh, so they always emphasized peace, and they had a method called peace breathing, where you inhale thinking world, exhale thinking peace, and that made an impact on me because that was the first time I was ever exposed to meditation, and I think that helped a lot. So other than that, I mean, I don't know. I didn't know what programs there were available, if there were any. You know, I've never heard of anything like that back then. Uh, but I continued the martial arts for a while, but then it became a little dangerous because at one time I broke my hand, and I had to play a record date the next week, so it was not so good. So I decided to stop and concentrate more on music.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the history of the background. And I think that's the confusion of, so something happens, like say some trauma happens in your childhood. And then when there was, if I had more resources and then languages given, and then tools, the coping skills that was given growing up, I think I wouldn't have suffered this long because I would have identified more and quicker, and I wouldn't have wasted in a way for depression and beating myself up.
I know exactly that feeling because I'm learning all these methods and tools and having all these realizations in the last couple of years, not only studying, but practicing yoga. Now I've been doing that for a couple of years. Uh, and that has been a total life changer, game changer for me. And sometimes I'm thinking, why didn't I discover this way back then? You know, but my yoga teacher sometimes says every moment is perfect. Even if it's messed up, it's still perfect. And I
And
realize the way things happen, they've all led us up to this very moment. And here we are. So we're okay.
yes, absolutely.
But
And
not
also,
everyone is okay. So we have to try to help them.
right. And I really want to go back to what you said during the adversity conversation, that you lost somebody close.
Right. I can say I think most people know me that I lost my first wife to suicide back in 1988. And we didn't know. We she was feeling depressed, and we had no idea what to do about it, and it just got to be too much for her.
I'm very sorry to hear that. I
Thank
remember
you.
you, yeah, I remember that you sharing it with me before.
Hmm.
And recently, one of my friends lost her husband to suicide, and a couple months ago. Um, it's such a tragedy, and I I don't know what to say. And some of my close friends lost a family member also to suicide.
Oh yeah, I've also lost students at
Mm.
Berkeley to suicide, and it's like they seem totally fine. They're into the music, having a great time in the lesson. They're growing, they're developing, and then all of a sudden, bam, they're gone. I just I just wish I could have done something, but what can you do? Try to help people that are around now. and that's what you do with this program. So that's good.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that because I think a lot of people who had lost loved ones to suicide, um, I think the hardest part is how do I share this? How do I, feel okay to share this and not being judged? And I think the challenge is that more we share our adversity and challenge, I think it would have impact on other lives as well. And then also yourself is, I think it's kind of healing to share because it's a life event and then it is something that truly happened to you. And for my case, abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, bullying, homelessness, that's subtitle of my book. And those are heavy things that happened to me. And
Oh yeah,
I didn't know what to process. But as I published my book and then starting this podcast and having this conversation, it gets not like easiest or easier, but it gets more, it takes out of the stigma that I
hmm,
had when I was in the middle of the storm.
right. You can deal with it because you can speak about it. It's not something that you can't touch.
Yes, absolutely. So I would like to shift our question to tools that you use to overcome these challenges. And you kind of mentioned a little bit, but I would like you to focus on the things that truly worked for you to overcome this. And the reason why I'm asking this to all of our guests are very important to me because a lot of people who have never gone through this magnitude of trauma, they'll just say, "Oh, talk to the therapist, you're gonna find a therapist."
Right.
And I think I heard it like hundreds of times, where you have no idea what you're talking about, and I just felt like not irresponsible, abandoned, but I felt no, there gotta be something that works. And then I tried so many modalities to heal myself. I tried so many things. So, would you share your tools that truly worked for you to overcome these challenges?
Sure. I did go through some therapy, and was lucky to have a very good therapist. So that was it was definitely helpful because they can illuminate things that you just might not be able to see, but they get it from your conversation. So that's one thing. But I haven't had that for many years. But as I mentioned, for the last couple of years, I've been studying yoga, and um, I've been practicing here in the studio. So all through the pandemic, I was practicing yoga. Before I was doing hit kickboxing, but it was a little hard on the hands sometimes. Um, but I started yoga, so it was a completely different thing. And I realized that in yoga, and I wasn't really trying to get anything. I was just practicing. I just wanted to start practicing and take care of myself. Uh, but it it gives you challenges because you have to get in all these positions, and sometimes it's painful, but you feel so good afterwards. And it also teaches you to be in the moment. And that I think is a real key thing. Like one person I listen to a lot is Eckhart Tolle. He talks about being present. Uh, it's not to say that you should forget the past or forget the future. Obviously, you can reflect and you can think about what's coming up and all that. But in daily life, if you're more present in what you're doing, you probably number one, you'll probably avoid a lot of accidents or a lot of misfortunes. So it's like being mindful, but not necessarily overthinking things. So that is kind of what I'm learning now with practicing yoga. You have to be there and be concentrating on what you're doing, and you have to breathe, and sometimes you have to surrender into the pose because it's so hard. But once you do that, you find the space in there. And I know it sounds kind of abstract, but you breathe into it, and then you can breathe into the space. And that kind of finds its way into the rest of your life. Um, like for example, I mean, I sometimes I have to play very simply on the drums, and I have to leave a lot of space, so I have to feel everything that's going on in between those beats. And sometimes I have to play a million miles an hour. And but even if you're playing a million miles an hour, you have to feel the space in that. So what was interesting also about studying at UMass is that the assignments they give you, it just seems completely impossible. Like there's no way I'm ever going to finish all this stuff on top of all the other stuff I have to do. But somehow everything got done. And I realized that there's nothing you can't do. There's nothing that's impossible. I mean, I don't know if I could sit here and levitate for you right now, but in terms of like all the challenges we face, there's nothing that we can't do to get through it. We just have to have the right mindset. And you know, I try not to dwell on the past. I try not to think only in the future. I try to think what's the best thing I could do to practice now. And the moment you take a deep breath, you're right there. You're right there in the present. Like Eckhart Tolle was saying, there are no problems right now. I mean, okay, I could have a broken arm or be in the hospital with COVID or whatever, but right now, there are no problems. I may have a lot of challenges to solve, but I have to take one step at a time. So that's basically it. And, you know, I'm just trying to be disciplined and be consistent in my practice. And I think that's what it takes. And I'm not thinking in terms of getting to point B, arriving. I'm thinking in terms of being where I am, even if I can't do a pose, even if I can't play bebop at 450 beats a minute yet. It'll get there, but I'm not going to worry about it. Just practice where I am. So if you practice where you are with whatever it is, life, music, uh, then you're going to be growing. Uh, One thing my yoga teacher suggested I do was keep a journal. So I've been keeping a journal for a while. And she introduced the idea of a sankalpa. Let me look this up for a second because I want to read this. This is a great tool that I've been using. And I'm just going to look up the email.
What did you say, Sankapa?
Sankalpa.
How do you spell?
It's Sankalpa. Okay, well, my phone's not behaving today. But basically, what it is you sit quietly and you try to go into the center of your being, and then you kind of observe what comes up, and you also create kind of a almost like an intention. For example, this morning, uh, I meditated for about 15 minutes, and I came up with one that was basically I continue to grow and embrace any challenges, something of that nature. So you can say my desires regarding such and such are already realized, or you can make it like an intention. So one I did the other day was I'm grateful for all the gifts that come my way, because so many good gigs are coming my way and so many good situations, and you know it's a really good time right now, and I feel like we have to show gratitude. So if you have some kind of personal intention like that, uh, you can feel it in your life, and you can kind of start to see it coming. I think if we look at life a certain way, we can see it as a big drag, and we look at life another way, we can see it as a series of gifts coming, which is basically the title of your book, you know. So I'm starting to see all the gifts coming my way, and I'm trying to not think from lack, like, oh, I can't do that because X, or I don't have this, or I don't have that. I try to think beyond that, and and then the energy you use, helps you go in that direction, whichever direction you want to go in. I've never tried to articulate it, so pardon if it's awkward, but I feel like that's a good direction for me, and I feel like with all these good things coming to me, I feel like I should really do my best to use the gifts to grow. So
You,
whatever happens, it's an opportunity to grow. And there's struggle, there's pain in growth, but there's also joy in growth.
you are eloquently elaborating the tools that I
Thank
asked
you.
for more than what I anticipated. And also, I really like the idea. It's almost like, half the glass empty or full kind of
Right.
concept. I remember when I was dating this boyfriend when I was 19 that I was such a negative person, and he told me, Juri, like, do you know this concept of half glass empty or half glass full? You are the half glass empty person. And then he really tried to teach me how to be grateful and then appreciative and not look at what I don't have. This is right after I was homeless, and then I was
Mhm.
very miserable. And then I think I had all the rights to be miserable, to be honest with you. But like I was very, very sad. And then he really taught me a lot during that time. And even now I'm a single mom, and if I look at all these challenges of being a single mom, it's hard. But at the same time, when I look at the other way around, like you said, opportunities and gifts. I have all these amazing friends like you, all my close friends who are helping my children, my dreams, and then my goals and my passion. Just like the 48 of film project too. I'm so grateful. And I think the moment that you realize that you have these gifts around you, and despite the challenges that we experienced, um, it's a matter of shifting the perspective and really trying to tell yourself, affirm yourself that you're valid. And we also talked about void the other day together. And
Yes.
that's a huge thing about discovering for me to overcome the adversity. The tools I didn't know was, say, openly, like, I suffered with sexual addiction due to my child sex abuse. And then I thought, you know, having these activities can fill it, but not having these activities can also fill the void. And I didn't know the other way around until recently. So I think it's very interesting how you shift to look at the space that we talked about, void, for instance, as empty or as a space that you can actually substitute with peace.
Right. When you talked about the glass being half full or half empty, maybe half empty is good because there's that space. Like if a student comes in and they know everything already, there's nothing I could teach them. They're just going to try to teach me. It's okay. I'll just take the money and let you go. But if they come in uh, with an empty cup, then there's something we can put in there. If their cup is full, there's no room. So I try to remember that, like I when I'm going in situations, I don't try to come in like I know everything. I just try to figure out what's best for this situation as a sideman, uh, musician, for example. And so for example, for the Boston Pops, I'm getting the charts in advance. I'm going to look at them, and then I'm going to look at the scores. But I'm going to come in with an open mind, just in case somebody wants to change something. Anyway, getting back to that void, I think that's what people want to fill it with something. But and people are sometimes afraid of silence. Like some people just turn on the TV just to have some sound, and they're uncomfortable with silence. But silence is just, the old adage, silence is golden. Silence is beautiful, and it's what gives music. It's what makes music music. Because if it were all sound, it wouldn't really be music. There'd have to be some space somewhere. You know, you have to inhale sometime. Uh, but yeah, I think that space, that silence, can be a sanctuary for any one of us, that we can use. And I was thinking about that with the sankalpa, that intention. That can also be a personal sanctuary. During the pandemic, I was here. There were no gigs. I had no money, but I was practicing yoga. We were trading recordings with people, having fun. But I knew that it would come back. I didn't think, oh, this is it. I'm going to lose my house. Um, I knew it was going to come back eventually. And I used the time as a personal reset, not a great reset that World Economic Forum is talking about. I'm talking about a personal reset. So that's when I started practicing yoga and doing it differently. And it's good to be back out. So, but the sanctuary part of it, I think, is important because we need a place we can go, a safe place we can go, a place we can regroup. And it doesn't have to be a physical place. It can be within you. And that basically is the space. A lot of people talk about the space in different ways. Uh, and I have to mention a dream I had close to when I was graduating. I dreamed I was leaving a large institution, which was obviously school, and there were a few things laying around, like pencils and stuff. I thought to myself, oh, maybe I should grab that pencil, and I stopped myself and I said, you know what? I don't need that. Just leave it. And then I kept going, and I was finally outside, and I was driving over this big bridge, this huge bridge, which went way up. I couldn't see what was on the other side, but it seemed to be made out of a different material than most roads. I realized later it was a giant yoga mat. And so I was driving on this thing really fast, and I remember saying to myself, Mark, slow down. You don't know what's on the other side. So I slowed down and I drove more in a controlled way. And when I got over the hump to the other side, I saw the biggest, brightest sun that I have ever seen, and nothing but water with the sun reflecting on the water. It was completely light, and it was quite amazing. So that was kind of an awakening dream. But the point that I wanted to make is that sometimes you have to let stuff go that you don't need anymore instead of taking it with you. And it's one of the hardest things to do. but you keep practicing, and then you get to that light at some point. And so that light, that's my sanctuary. I can go there anytime I need to. Just take a breath and think about it, and we're there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. It's very interesting and inspiring. And just to let you know, a guest that I had, it just reminded me of David Torres' story that he had panic attack and then got prescription medication, and then he got kind of addicted to it, and then he got opioid, and then on top of that, some other, addictions, and then his heart stopped. And
Oh,
then
wow.
after that, he was in this, rehab houses, and then he learned so much techniques. Now he said, my show now, when he has panic attack, he knows the tools that he was taught at this recovery places, and then um, he can come back in 10 minutes. And I was just thinking about it this morning, and it's the light void, the conversation that we are having right now. I think these are all the signs and tools, coping skills that we lack, as our generation did not have those resources to even identify that we were depressed or PTSD or whatever the hell it was. And then I think having those tools as a parent and as somebody who does journalism and then this podcast and then filmmaking, I think it's important for us to know more tools in the toolboxes, and then just like, have this aid that's ready to go. Almost like when you have a fever, you go to CVS and then get Tylenol and then just take the fever medication. And sometimes people say piggyback ibuprofen and Tylenol. And then those I didn't know until I had children. And then now I know what to do. But then trauma and depression and panic attacks, those are not easy to talk about or aid.
Right.
Some people call police or like go extreme and then get in more trouble. So I think having these tools and conversation and then perspectives that you learn during the pandemic, especially everyone went through that, is I think it's extremely important.
I totally agree. And also to refresh your knowledge and refresh your practice, because you could learn something that could change your life, but then you could forget it next week and go back to exactly the way it was before. So it's like you have to keep practicing. It's life is a practice,
Yes,
and it's the
absolutely.
real thing. It's the real thing, but it's also a practice.
Yes, and I've heard it takes 21 days for subconscious to change completely. So
Oh
I did
wow,
this
yeah,
21 days
interesting,
of meditation, like
interesting.
21 days challenge. Of course, I had a checkbox and I did all 21 days to shift my subconsciousness. So that's
You're
actually
you. I have to say, you were an amazing example of.
me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just yeah, it's amazing. I have so much admiration for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm doing, but I think I'm much better prepared for my panic attack and then for anyone around me that is going through a hard time. Like I can
yeah,
be right there and I can tell them what to do, which is amazing to me because I didn't know what to do.
yeah. And pretty much everyone's going through a hard time at some point. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean that's life, but it teaches us.
So my last question is a gift. So what is a gift that came from the adversity?
Um, I think maybe I was taught what not to do just by observing others. Um, but also I had to observe that in myself. I had to figure out what to leave behind. So that was definitely a gift because now I'm not anxious. I'm not depressed. I'm looking forward to everything that's happening in life every moment, and it's real. It's not fake, you know. So, and it really helps me to deal with whatever comes up because undoubtedly situations are going to come up. There's always a solution. There's always something you can do. There's always a practice, and even when life gets really messed up, I try to remember every moment is perfect, and something good will come of this. It sort of tests your philosophy, I guess. You know, I believe we come from essence. We come from the void. We come from essence. The larger void. Some people say God. Some people don't believe in anything. It doesn't really matter. Physically, we're same stuff as stars. Uh, so we come here and we learn and we have a good time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for coming to a gift from adversity today and sharing your story and tools and a gift. And I really appreciate our friendship and these deep conversations as we grow older and learn more of these life experiences and then how to overcome these challenges every day. So my last request is if somebody's listening to this podcast and is going through hardship right now, what kind of advice can you give?
I would say the first thing you can do is take a deep breath and just be right there. If you feel depression or heartbreak or whatever, just be an observer to that feeling. Don't try to push it away, just observe it and just keep breathing. And I think that would be a good first step. Then that will probably keep you from doing something you might regret later. And also, you can just sit with it and then later on you'll feel better.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. As simple as it said, deep breathing when you are having a panic attack and when you're hyperventilating, that's one thing you can't do.
Right.
It's just hard. And I've experienced it firsthand when I'm having panic attack, I hyperventilate, I can't breathe, I can't catch a breath, like literally. So having to have that reminder, just deep breath and then just let it go. And I like earlier what you said when you inhale the world and exhale the peace. I really
Yes.
like, I really like that concept. And
Yeah. That was conceived by this Master Kim, who I used to study with in Chicago, and he said everything is fading away, everything is renewing, and so he would emphasize that part of it. So all problems are fading away, everything's fading away, everything's renewing. It's just like nature. You look outside, you see that. So, and he said if you keep world peace in mind, that vibration is going to go all around the world and come back to you.
I like that.
Yeah, and there's many different things you could say. You can say, you can you can make up your own uh, saying as you breathe. It doesn't have to
Absolutely.
be just world peace, but world peace is a good universal one.
Yes, absolutely. I can't thank you enough for your time today. And also when you are listening and then going through a hard time, like Mark and I talked about today, and Mark shared about a moment being present and there's no problem. I like that a lot because I think a lot of it that's eating ourselves up is the past and the
Oh yeah,
future. So the
and the future.
past, yeah, past is the trauma. For my case, is the childhood trauma that's eating my present, and present moment, and the future and anxiety. What if I say this to this person and that's gonna happen, and then that might never happen, and then you just create these monsters, like situations, like in your head. But when you look
Right.
at it now, you're right. Like there's no problem right now.
Another thing Eckhart Tolle said was that we're addicted to thinking. I mean, thinking is good. Of course, we need thinking to function and do our daily life, but sometimes it can just spiral into something really negative. Like you're figuring out what you want to eat, and then 20 minutes later, how dreadful your life is. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Absolutely. Well,
But
thank
it's
you so
hard.
much. Yeah, thank you so much. This was so meaningful to me, and
Thank
I'm
you.
so yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, and then I continue to have great guests for a gift University. But thank you again, um, Mr. Mark Walker,
My
for
pleasure. Thank you,
being
Juri.
at University. Yes, and thank you to our audience for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
All right. Take care.